Most people think that once they hit a certain number, things will change. 6 figures, maybe even 1 million. That's when it all starts, right? But here's what I've noticed after years of watching people build their way up from nothing. There's something much more significant that happens earlier. Way earlier. Around the first $20,000 you save. It's not magic. It's not instant wealth, but something shifts. Something quiet but fundamental. The way you see money changes, and that shift is everything. When you hit $20,000, you're not just saving money. You're buying yourself something much more important. You're buying time to make better decisions. You're buying the ability to think instead of react. And once you start thinking instead of reacting, your entire relationship with money begins to slow down in a good way. You stop treating every dollar like it's the last one you'll ever see. That's the part most people miss. The first $20,000 doesn't just change your balance. It changes how long you can think before you act. And the length of that pause between decision and reaction quietly determines most financial outcomes in life. Before you have a decent savings cushion, every financial decision carries more weight than it should. Every choice feels urgent. When you're living close to zero, a $200 car repair might as well be $2,000. Not because you can't technically come up with the money, but because of what it does to everything else. It means you're putting groceries on a credit card this week. It means you're dodging that other bill until next month. It means you're lying awake at night doing math in your head. And that mental math never really stops. It follows you to work. It follows you into conversations. It sits in the background of every decision you make, even the small ones. That constant pressure doesn't just drain your wallet, it drains your focus. Think about it like this. You're at a job you don't particularly like. Maybe the boss is difficult. Maybe the work environment is toxic. But when you have no cushion, no savings, you can't even consider leaving. You can't take the risk of a gap in employment. So you stay. You stay in situations that drain you because you don't have the financial margin to do anything else. This isn't about being bad with money. Most people who are stuck in this cycle aren't reckless. They're just living in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you don't think clearly. You can't. Your brain is too busy managing immediate threats to think about long-term strategy. You're always reacting, and that reaction is never as good as a decision made with calm and clarity. Now, if you've been following my earlier videos, you know I talk about the baby steps, getting your first $1,000 saved, then $5,000, then $10,000. It's not sexy, it's not exciting, but here's what it is. It's your way out of survival mode. It's the slow process of proving to yourself that money can accumulate instead of disappear. That first $1,000 means a flat tire doesn't send you into a spiral. At $5,000, you start to feel breathing room. At $10,000, you begin to think a month or two ahead instead of just a week. But once you hit $20,000, you cross a line that most people don't understand. It's the first real point where you go from just holding your ground to having actual options, real options. You stop scrambling. You stop living month to month. You start making choices from a place of control, not complete control, but enough control that you can actually think about what you want instead of just reacting to what's happening to you. This is the difference between having savings symbolically and having savings that actually change how you behave. When you have $20,000, you start to feel it in your bones. You start to believe, really believe that you'll be okay. And that belief changes everything. It changes how you negotiate, how you plan, even how you walk into a room. I want to talk about something Bill Perkins mentions in his book, Die with Zero. He talks about money as an option, not just a number. Most people think that once you have more money, you can buy things. But what Perkins is really saying is that money buys you freedom to make better choices. Let's be clear. It's not about the stuff you buy, it's about the options that open up when you have money sitting there available. When you don't have that cushion, every choice feels risky. So you play it safe in ways that actually aren't safe at all. You accept a job offer you don't really want because you can't afford to keep looking. You stay in a lease you can't quite afford because moving costs money you don't have. But when you've saved that $20,000, you suddenly have space to breathe. You don't make rushed decisions anymore. You can take a week to think about a job offer instead of accepting it on the spot out of desperation. You can tell a difficult client that you're not a good fit. You can wait for the right apartment. You stop accepting bad offers because you feel desperate. You start picking the long-term growth instead of the short-term fix. That freedom, that ability to say no and to choose your best path is priceless. And most people underestimate how powerful the ability to say no really is. So, why is $20,000 the magic number? Once you've got that cushion, you step out of survival mode and into growth mode. Before $20,000, most of your financial choices are reactive. They're based on fear of missing out, fear of not having enough, fear of falling behind, and you make choices from that place, quick, shallow, often costly choices, but once you have that buffer, the fear starts to fade, not completely, but the edge comes off, the desperation eases, and with less fear, you can make better choices, more thoughtful choices. You can take your time, you can say no to bad deals and yes to opportunities that actually make sense. I remember when I first crossed this threshold myself, and honestly, nothing changed that day, but over the next few months, I noticed something. I stopped checking my bank balance obsessively. I started thinking about my career in terms of years instead of months. I turned down a freelance project that paid well but would have made me miserable. That was the $20,000 working. It wasn't visible from the outside, but internally it was a completely different mindset. It shows up in small moments. Standing in a store and deciding to wait instead of swiping, saying, let me think about it instead of saying yes on the spot, choosing a path that's slightly uncomfortable now because, it's better later. These decisions don't look dramatic from the outside, but they stack up. And that stack is where financial lives change. To give you an example, look at Warren Buffett. He didn't become rich overnight. What made him wealthy was his ability to think long-term and not act impulsively. Imagine if Buffett had acted out of desperation early in his career. His decisions would have been entirely different. He would have been too worried about paying his bills or making his next payment. When you have a cushion like that first $20,000, you can think long term. You can make decisions that align with where you want to be in 5 years, not just where you need to be next week. And here's the twist. You don't need to be Warren Buffett to make these types of decisions. You just need to start with $20,000. That cushion creates the mental space where smart decisions become possible. The truth is, your life doesn't change immediately once you reach $20,000. You're not suddenly wealthy, but you are something even more valuable. You're mentally free. You start making decisions with a clear head, not a panicked heart. You begin planning for the future, not just surviving the present. You start thinking about opportunities instead of avoiding losses. When you can think clearly, you can make money work for you. You can invest in yourself. Say no to a dead-end job and take a risk on something better. You can also handle setbacks better because setbacks are coming. But when you have that cushion, setbacks are just setbacks. They're not catastrophes. They're problems you can solve, not spirals you can't escape. That emotional stability alone is worth more than most people realize. Most people are chasing bigger numbers, 6 figures, 7 figures, but here's the shift. You don't need to chase $1 million first. You need to reach $20,000 because at $20,000, money stops feeling like an emergency. It stops being pressure. It becomes margin. It becomes space. Space to think clearly, space to make better decisions, space to stop operating in survival mode. That's when your financial life actually begins. Wealth doesn't start when you earn more. It starts when you stop being afraid. When one unexpected expense doesn't shake your entire system, when a mistake isn't a disaster, when you're no longer reacting to everything. At $20,000, you stop being a passenger. You start being the driver. So start now. Whatever you can save, start building toward that number, not for status, not for optics, for stability, for clarity, for control. If this resonated, in the next video, I break down the 5 things I did to finally stop wasting my money. The exact shifts that changed everything. Click on the video on screen and let's keep building this the right way. Do the boring stuff, it works.